Alaska Airlines has teamed up with Hawaiian Airlines to create new nonstop international flights. Go to alaskaair.com or hawaiianairlines.com, and I'll tell you more details later in the show. I'm Rachel Belle, and this is Your Last Meal, the show where celebrities share stories about the foods they love most, and we dig into the history, culture, or science of those meals with experts from around the world. Today on the program, China Forbes and Timothy Nishimoto from Pink Martini.
Je ne veux pas travailler, je ne veux pas déjeuner, je veux seulement oublier, et puis je fume.
Pink Martini is a global orchestra with more than a dozen members. China is the lead singer, and Timothy is a vocalist and percussionist. And the Portland, Oregon-based band is celebrating its 30th anniversary with a tour and a new album. They're playing 7 shows in the Pacific Northwest in April before jetting off to Europe and then coming back to the US for more shows. So get your tickets now. Pink Martini has sold more than 3 million records on its independent label, Heinz Records, and played with more than 70 orchestras from around the world, everywhere from the Los Angeles Philharmonic to the Sydney Opera House. If you check your calendar, you will notice it is March. But thanks to China's last meal, today on the show, we're celebrating Thanksgiving. We'll learn the history of the holiday and about a woman with the best worst name ever, Dorcas Riley, who is responsible for inventing an iconic Thanksgiving dish. That's coming up later in the show. But first, my conversation with Pink Martini's China Forbes and Timothy Nishimoto.
Et puis je
Like I mentioned, Pink Martini is celebrating 30 years as a band. I looked up what the gift is for a 30th anniversary. Do you know?
No.
It's pearl. In relation to food, I was wondering what both of your opinions are on oysters.
Of course, Timothy loves them and I hate them.
Timothy, you're an oyster fan like me?
I used to love oysters. Like I could eat a dozen oysters in one sitting. And I was at this great, very Portland restaurant called Bistro Montage. It was a wacky place, but oyster shooters where, you order the oyster shooters, the way the server like screams them out, 3 oyster shooters, it was such a fun thing to do. And for some reason, one time I was gagging and I couldn't swallow it. And then for about 10, 15 years, I could not eat oysters at all. But now I'm back. I can have 3 at the very most. I actually love them with champagne or sparkling wine, but usually go with 2.
None.
I go with none, but I'll take the pearl.
Okay, yeah. Is it a texture thing for you?
It surely is. And an aroma thing.
Oh,
They smell of the sea, though. The beautiful sea. Yes.
I know, but I don't want to swallow seawater.
Okay.
okay, that's fair.
I wish I liked them. It's so much more fun to like things.
Yes, it's true, but you're saving yourself a lot of money.
Yeah.
They're an expensive habit, for sure. Pink Martini was formed in 1994 by band leader Thomas Lauderdale in the most random of circumstances. He was 3 years out of college, working in politics, and contemplating running for mayor in Portland.
And there was this measure in Oregon to try to make homosexuality illegal in the state. And so he was fighting this. And having seen Pee Wee Herman's amazing Christmas special with all of these guests that were so fantastic, it's like Oprah Winfrey, Katie Lang. And then there were these triplets in their 70s named the Del Rubio triplets, and they played guitars and they had matching outfits. And he thought that they were incredible. And so he found them somehow and then asked them to come to Portland to help get people to vote no on Measure 13. He threw a concert and needed an opening act, so he started a band to open for the Del Rubio triplets. Portland loved the band. They started playing around town. Timothy was a guest vocalist in the early first year, and then he ultimately didn't get along with the singer that he started with, and he called me in New York and asked me if I would come this weekend. It was so urgent. So I left what I was doing in New York, came to Portland, sang, left. He asked me to come back. Then it went on for 3 years. And then I finally moved to Portland. So Pink Martini has been a band since 1994.
I love that Pee Wee Herman is a part of the origin story. I freaking love Pee Wee Herman so much.
I know.
And what an interesting thing to go from almost running for mayor to being in this band that travels the world.
He always says it's more fun to play music than to be under fluorescent lighting, arguing with constituents.
Where did the band name Pink Martini come from?
Well, of course, Thomas thought of it. I think he had uncharacteristically smoked pot or something, like he was in a dream world. And he loved Henry Mancini, the Pink Panther. He loved Breakfast at Tiffany's, cocktails, and he just loved the color pink and just blurted out Pink Martini.
I think the ironic thing is he doesn't really even drink.
No, or smoke pot.
He loves the idea of a cocktail party because it's so fabulous, but he doesn't actually drink much. Like randomly he will, but
yeah, that's how I feel about martinis because I don't really like them. It's too boozy for me and astringent, but they look so cool and they're so iconic. Every time I try one, I'm like, nope, not this time.
oh, that's too bad.
I love martinis, but I don't drink alcohol, so I can't have them.
The band may live in Portland, but they feel like global citizens.
We actually have sung in up to 30 languages, not all on our records, but live over the years. You know, we went to Vietnam and we sang Amado Mio in Vietnamese. Like we'll learn something on the spot when we're traveling.
What do you do to prepare for that? Because I understand that you don't speak 30 languages. Right. And especially with something like Vietnamese, it's very tonal.
Oh, God. Well, when you sing, the tonal quality isn't as important as when you speak because you're already singing the melody, you know? I do my best. And then in keeping with what we were just talking about, I pretend I'm a little bit tipsy so that I'm not so uptight and rigid and I'm not over pronouncing the words and I kind of slur them together and burnish the edges and make it just sound natural. And people are always like, you sound like a native speaker. And
well, word's going to be out after this that you don't drink. So you won't have an excuse for sounding drunk anymore if you mispronounce something.
It won't.
China takes her Thanksgiving dinner very seriously and insists that a very specific 7 dishes, and those 7 dishes only, be on the holiday table. We'll get into that right after this break. There is nothing better than a nonstop flight. And starting May 12th, Alaska Airlines is offering nonstop service from Seattle to Tokyo. So you can sleep, nibble and sip on Northwest snacks and drinks, and enjoy more than 800 movies and TV episodes, all for free, including programming from the Food Network, Sub Pop, and all the fun content we make here at Cascade PBS. 10 hours later, you're slurping the best soba, ramen, or udon of your life in Tokyo. Alaska Airlines has teamed up with Hawaiian Airlines, so you can book your trip at alaskaair.com and hawaiianairlines.com. Timothy, you sent in a very annoying fact about yourself, which is that you can eat and eat and eat and eat, and you cannot gain weight.
It's true. I just turned 60 in October, and I literally weigh the same that I did when I graduated from high school.
Wow.
I've worked out regularly since then. I picked up weightlifting, and I don't know what it is. I can't gain weight. And China knows when we're on the tour bus, she sees me eating. I eat all day.
Constantly.
And I eat a lot of food. I eat well, though. I eat healthy. I don't eat junk food. I never eat. I don't eat fast food ever. But I eat protein 3 times a day at least. And so that's a fact.
What have you eaten so far today? Because I always like hearing, like what football players eat. And it's like 3 dozen eggs for breakfast, 6 loaves of bread.
Yeah. Well, for breakfast, I had 2 eggs with sausage, whole wheat, English muffin, big bowl of granola with soy milk, bunch of raw carrots, and kombucha.
And that was just breakfast.
That was breakfast.
Yeah.
Oh my God. That's my whole day.
And you're a certified sommelier as well.
Yeah. I opened up a wine bar in 2005 in Portland, downtown. in the Pearl District. I got certified by the Court of Master Sommeliers.
Let's talk about last meals. Timothy, what would your last meal be?
When we were in Paris one time, it was my birthday, and I went alone before a show to this amazing 3-star Michelin restaurant, 14 courses. I had wine pairings. This is before a show. At China, can you remember the name of that restaurant?
L'Arpège.
Yeah, L'Arpège. And it was the most amazing meal I've ever had, bar none. That would be my last meal for sure. At L'Arpège in Paris, 14 courses before a show.
Do you remember any of the courses?
Well, of course, I was trying to be subtle and taking pictures. So I actually still have all the pictures. I haven't looked at them in a while, but and they weren't these teeny tiny little courses. There was sea urchin, and there was one, I don't remember the what kind of fish it was, but it was a huge piece of fish. I mean, it was one side of a fillet. And so L'Arpège, they got their Michelin stars, and then they went, it was pretty scandalous, but he ended up going all vegetarian after he got his Michelin stars. All the food came from his gardens outside of Paris. When I was there, he had started adding some fish courses.
And then you played a show right after, which is pretty rare. I feel like a lot of musicians that I interview say that they don't eat for hours before they play or sing.
Yeah, I will eat right before going on stage. Yep. I'm not scared. Like I said, I eat all day long, and I eat a lot. It's so incredible. And China, you've been there too, right?
Yes.
China, did you love it?
I did. I loved that it was vegetarian when I went. I mean, I already told you I don't like oysters. There's a lot of things you might not like when you go to a restaurant like that and you don't choose what you're having. And so when it's vegetarian, it's just like heaven because you're going to love everything.
Yeah.
China, what would your last meal be?
Thanksgiving dinner. It's my favorite meal, but I'm really particular about what it is. For me, it's like it has to have 7 things and no more things.
Okay.
The 7 specific things are turkey, stuffing, gravy, mashed potatoes, mashed sweet potatoes, cranberry sauce, and peas.
Peas.
Frozen peas with butter, baby. That's the key to my Thanksgiving, and no one else cares, but I always make it.
I understand if you want these certain elements that you want, but why would you not accept any extras?
Because people always, I don't want to upset people, but like people are always like, let me bring like spicy something or something, or like Brussels sprouts, which just isn't a part of my 7. And those flavors are overwhelming flavors, which I love Brussels sprouts, but with Thanksgiving, it's like this alchemy. I put everything on one bite, on one fork, and it goes together. It's like a symphony. Brussels sprouts is a dissonant note that's coming in and ruining everything. And the peas are held together by the mashed potatoes and the mashed sweet potatoes, and the stuffing holds it together, and the cranberry sauce and the gravy and the turkey on the bottom. And like, I just like it all on one bite.
Do you eat every bite with everything in one bite?
Yes.
That's impressive.
It's my most favorite thing to do. And then the desserts have to be apple pie and pumpkin pie.
That's what I was going to ask. Yeah.
Yeah, with vanilla ice cream.
And no rolls or any kind of bread?
Rolls are fine. They're so benign. They're not going to ruin my symphony. But, and like, my ex-husband now brings really yummy rolls from Little T Bakery in Portland. So I'm not going to argue with that. But I don't really want rolls because I don't want to fill up on rolls.
Yeah. How do you feel about the next day leftover Thanksgiving sandwich?
Well, for me, it's a hash, and I would love to make it, but I am not hosting. And so sometimes you don't really have all the leftovers the next day. I hope to take home a little bit because I like put everything in a pan and break it up and chop it up and brown it and crisp it up and then serve it all together. So it's like my one fork, but now it's a hash.
How have you been able to control this your whole Thanksgiving life? Because you said you're not hosting, so you're going somewhere else and you need these 7 elements and no others to be present. How have you managed to pull this off?
I don't pull it off.
You don't know China.
I don't pull it off. I can't keep these other things away. Even my boyfriend is going to bring something I disapprove of, but I just don't need to eat it. Like I just have my 7, and as long as they're there, I don't care what the rest of the people bring. But my friend knows. I mean, my friends know what my 7 are, and they pretty much are covering everything except I'm going to make the peas. I used to make mashed potatoes, but one of them wants to make mashed potatoes. So I'm happy to not do that.
Timothy, when you said you don't know China, what did you mean by that?
Well, I love this about her, but she's very specific about so many things. And you said, how do you control all of that? And that's why I said, you don't know China. She was like, nope, this is it. This is what's happening. Things have to be very specific.
Gotta have salt on that chocolate.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, I love this too, because I've been making this podcast for 8 years and I've interviewed, hundreds of people for it. And no one has ever said Thanksgiving dinner, which is kind of surprising.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So that makes me happy too.
Oh, good.
It's iconic.
It is.
Were these 7 items, I'm assuming, like what were on your table growing up? Is that why they became the ones?
Yes, they were. I realized, as I've reflected on my food preferences over the years, I don't see myself as a traditional person at all, but I'm very sort of plain with my food. They're like, would you like hummus or would you like it with maitake mushrooms on top or lamb nuggets? And it's like, I'd like it plain. I'd like a margarita pizza. I don't want a bunch of other things on it, even though it tastes good with arugula and prosciutto or whatever. I just want a margarita pizza. I just want spaghetti pomodoro in Rome. I don't want a bunch of other flavors. I think I just really appreciate the simplicity of those ingredients and that preparation. And the other things seem like a distraction.
I can appreciate that because you can just kind of taste the main characters of the dish. Yeah.
So you don't want Brussels sprouts at Thanksgiving either.
I mean, I'll eat them. I know we were trying to bond right there, but I was like, well, no, I'll have that. But I will say, I'm going to the same family that I've had Thanksgiving with maybe the last 6 or 7 years. And his mom is making everyone mad this year because she's changing the menu. And nobody can understand why, and everyone's mad. No turkey, she's making a ham. What's going on? No mashed potatoes, she's doing scalloped potatoes. Why? Hi, Rachel Belle, jumping in here to say nobody was really mad. I was being a little overdramatic. I love ham. And if you're listening, friend's mom, I love you and thanks for inviting me to Thanksgiving. It sounds like it's like an Easter dinner or a Christmas dinner.
Right.
We only get to have this once a year. Why are you doing this?
Yeah.
Is she bored? Because I think that's why everyone adds all those other things to everything.
Maybe you want the traditional thing for certain.
Right.
For holidays. Yeah. For their last meals, Timothy wants a 14-course dinner from Alain Passard's 3 Michelin-starred Paris restaurant, L'Arpège. If you want to look at the menu or are unsure how to spell the name of the restaurant like I was, you can find a link in the show notes. And for China's last meal, a very specific 7-dish Thanksgiving dinner. Happy Thanksgiving! You probably get called more in November.
Yeah.
I called Anna Zeta, Associate Professor of History and Director of the Food Studies Program at Virginia Tech. Let's talk about what the original Thanksgiving was. The holiday has become problematic for many reasons, but was there an actual first Thanksgiving dinner, and what were they eating, if so?
Yes, I actually like talking about the history of Thanksgiving, in part because I think it can help reclaim it as a holiday worth celebrating in the present, thinking of it less as, I guess, a Native American rooted tradition and more as a Civil War era tradition, and thinking about unity. But at the sort of what's considered the original Thanksgiving, there are some records that remain from a feast that happened in 1621 between British colonists and the Wampanoag people who lived in that part of what is today Southeast Massachusetts. At the time, all foods that would have been eaten by both colonists and native peoples were the plants and animals that were native to that area. Wild fowl, including some wild turkey, fish like cod and bass, venison, with deer being really a prevalent animal supply of meat, and then corn as a sort of staple agricultural product.
Anna says after that first famous Thanksgiving meal, there's no record of it catching on, especially not as an annual or national holiday. She says people definitely created feasts around the autumn harvest, but it wasn't until the Civil War that Thanksgiving became a national holiday.
And this is really relevant because this is a time of real tension in the US over slavery, of course, but also over immigration, general sense of tension around like, who are we as a nation? And so different leaders start to sort of look back to the colonial past as a way to say, what can we glean from this past to offer our nation some kind of unifying story that can bring us together? And one of the leaders of this is a really interesting character named Sarah Josepha Hale. And she's the editor of a very popular women's magazine named Godey's Ladies Book. She, over decades, petitions presidents, asks them, can we make this a national holiday? I think Thanksgiving is a story that we can all get behind, of different people coming together, different pasts, and sharing food and sharing, a sense of community. And finally, during the middle of the Civil War, this really lands well with Abraham Lincoln, who in the middle of the war and the fighting decides to pass a national holiday, 1863, the Thanksgiving Proclamation. And it's really interesting because in his statement about what this holiday is about, there's no reference to kind of that indigenous history, colonial history. It's about uniting a divided nation. And so, not to say that we should erase, I think, the indigenous history of this holiday, of course, but also I think if we think of it as having roots in a time of coming together over food to celebrate the hope of a more united nation, that there's something a bit redemptive about it.
Oh my God, can Thanksgiving save us now?
That's my hope. Yeah.
So was there a menu that came with this proclamation? What were people eating then?
No, not exactly, except again, the fact that Hale was such a critical force in this, and she was editing this magazine. Her magazine does propose menus alongside this holiday, even before the proclamation, sort of like, here's some things you could have as a nice fall harvest feast. And then I do think her published recipes for the meal over the years help to contribute to a kind of standardized taste for what goes along with this holiday.
Was there a time in her magazine that she did present all of these items that we tend to see together, like mashed potatoes, sweet potatoes, turkey, stuffing, cranberry sauce?
Some of the early recipes she calls for definitely include roast turkey, often kind of herbed dressings, creamed vegetables, creamed onions, and mashed potatoes are certainly ones that appear. Less the sweet potato, actually. And certainly by the early 20th century, you do start to see cranberries, not always in a sauce. And cranberries are one of the few dishes that have North American botanical origins. So those do have a real indigenous component to them, along with pumpkins. And so pumpkin pie as a core part of that holiday does have those kind of roots back to the 19th century.
I didn't know until I was researching this week that sweet potatoes aren't actually potatoes. Technically, they're not in the same family as a white potato.
Yeah, that is very interesting. Although they do both have botanical origins in South America. But yeah, they're a different kind of category altogether.
What is your favorite Thanksgiving dish?
I wrote a book called U.S. History in 15 Foods, and one of the chapters in the 1950s is green bean casserole. And I wrote it in part because it's a very divisive dish at my own family Thanksgiving, because my husband loves it, grew up eating it, must have it the standard canned green bean, canned cream of mushroom soup way. And when I joined his family, I found it pretty gross. And I thought, oh, surely we can make this with fresh green beans and saute our own onions. And he was like, no, this is not a modifiable dish. And so over time, I came to sort of like it in a way. But now that I wrote a whole chapter about green bean casserole and its role in the Cold War, I came to really feel quite emotionally attached to this dish.
I love the origin story, mostly because I love that there was a person named Dorcas Riley. Who did
Yes.
that to you? Who did that to you, girl? Will you
Great.
tell that story? And then I didn't know about the Cold War connection.
Yeah, so green bean casserole, yes, was invented by a home economist who worked for Campbell's Soup Company named Dorcas Riley in the 1950s. Her job was basically to take Campbell's soup and other products and create recipes from them. And so she invented this dish that combines, cans of green beans with a can of Campbell's cream of mushroom soup, and then is often topped with also canned French's fried onions. Her recipe card is actually in the National Inventors Hall of Fame, and which I love too, as a sort of giving some value to the inventive work she was doing. And Campbell's decided to put this on the back of their soup labels around Thanksgiving, and it sort of took off and became this Thanksgiving-oriented dish. I write about it as a kind of embodiment of the role of processed food and more generally kitchen technologies in the Cold War. The Americans really held up the kitchen technologies and also their women who were able to put together a beautiful meal for their husbands and families while still wearing pearls and high heels. Like that kind of imagery of this stock idea of the Leave It to Beaver sort of woman was really held up in contrast to the Soviet women working in the factory in their coveralls, eating kind of less thoughtful food, is the way that they put it, was one way to showcase the superiority of democracy and capitalism over Soviet communism. And so the fact that this dish could just be combining these processed foods coming out of a major industrial test kitchen really embodied this strength that the food industry and the U.S. government saw in its positionality to the Soviet Union in the Cold War.
It truly was invented out of capitalism. It was in this test kitchen, and it's become something that, people think of as family, it's holiday, it's memories, it's tradition. And I think that's maybe kind of what our country is a mix of hidden capitalism
right
into our traditions. I don't know. That's like
sometimes the invisibility of those things, right?
Yes.
We don't know why we care about the things we care about. And then of course, often these stories that are not insidious, but very kind of behind the scenes, but powerful in shaping our tastes for food, certainly, and culture more generally.
When we come back, China tells me which super popular modern baking trend she started doing way back in the 80s. And Thomas shares an embarrassing story that involves a public bathroom and blue cheese. I am always on the hunt for a new food podcast, and one that I've been digging lately is Seattle Eats with Ton Vinh, produced by Seattle's KUOW in partnership with the Seattle Times. Ton is a Seattle Times journalist and food writer. On every episode, he shares his intel on the area's hottest restaurants and roadside food stalls. Everything from where to find Seattle's best teriyaki to the top wines at Costco. Listen to Seattle Eats with Ton Vinh on the KUOW app or wherever you get podcasts. I understand that you were a very early adopter of adding salt to desserts.
Oh my God. I so was. There's this thing that happened in high school. I was on a lacrosse team, and our amazing coach decided, because it was raining, to bring us all to her apartment to bake chocolate chip cookies.
Cute.
And my teammates, who maybe had no experience baking, they were like, why is there salt in the recipe? And I was like, no, there's always salt. There's always salt. It's so delicious. You need it with chocolate because it's amazing with chocolate. And they just didn't get it at all. And so I was kind of commandeering the baking, and I kept putting a little bit more salt in every time they turned around.
And this was in 1986, way before the flaky salt on the chocolate chip cookie.
Totally. And I kept adding salt. And then when the cookies came out, they were so salty that they were inedible. So of course I shot myself in the foot, but I did know, I knew that chocolate and salt had to go together.
Were you already baking at that age, or into cooking and conscious of food? Is that how you knew?
I was into baking. Yeah. We baked cookies all the time. My dad made crepes and donuts, and we were always baking. Yeah. My dad was a really great cook. He didn't follow recipes. He just knew how to cook. I mean, my parents worked at WGBH when Julia Child's show started. So they were there for those recordings of her early episodes.
Wow.
And so he had this sensibility. He's part French, he's really into that. So he would make anything from beef bourguignon to as I said, crepes or homemade bread. And he would, if we were sick, he would bake bread and put butter and honey on it and bring it to us. And it was just the coziest thing ever. He was a very cozy person. I was inspired by the fact that he didn't need to follow a recipe, and that he was improvisational in his life and in his cooking. And I sort of took that with me. I do follow recipes, but I also feel like I have a sense of what should go together.
Yes. I laughed out loud when I read this. Tell me the blue cheese in the bathroom story.
Oh my. I know China's heard this story, but I was at a restaurant in Portland, and I was standing at the urinal in the bathroom, and I just got fixated on the words blue cheese and the way my Japanese uncle says it. And he says blue cheese. And I was just standing there and just saying it over and over, thinking I was alone in the bathroom. And then I hear, and apparently there was some guy on the toilet listening to me go on and on about blue cheese.
Just over and over again. I lived in Japan for a year in 2009, 2010, and I taught English to adults. And I felt like my mission for the year became trying to explain to them why we say cheese when we take a picture, because every time they take a picture, they would say cheese. And I'm like, no. We're trying to make the smile shape is why we say it. So you guys are doing this little duck face, and then you have to snap your mouth back real fast to get the smile. And I was like, why don't you say sushi? That would make more sense. And they just were like, lady, we're still going to say cheese.
That is so true. They say cheese.
Yeah. And those were China Forbes and Timothy Nishimoto's last meals. Pink Martini is going on tour from April to October. You can buy tickets at pinkmartini.com/shows or find the link in the show notes. Your Last Meal is a product of Seattle's Cascade PBS. Go to cascadepbs.org to become a member. That's how you get on-demand access to all PBS programming. And there are so many good food shows. Everything from the classic Old Julia Child to America's Test Kitchen, food and travel shows hosted by friend of the pod, Patty Yinich, and the new Finding Edna Lewis documentary. And speaking of Cascade PBS food shows, season 2 of my show, The Nosh with Rachel Belle, kicks off Thursday, April 3rd at 8:50 p.m. There are 8 episodes. They air every Thursday in April and May. I am really proud of this season. We've been working on it since May, so I hope that you will watch. Let me give you a taste of some of the episodes. So episode 2, I went down to Portland, Oregon to visit Salt and Straw headquarters, and I got to create a zero waste flavor on the fly with co-founder Tyler Malik. In another episode, we explore Seattle-style pizza, if there even is a Seattle style of pizza. And I go on a hike with one of TikTok's favorite outdoor cooks to make a fancy wilderness meal. That is just the tip of the iceberg. There are 8 episodes. If you are living in Washington State or BC, you can watch on Channel 9 Cascade PBS, but anyone can watch anywhere, anytime on the Cascade PBS app or at cascadepbs.org. Of course, you can find all of these links in the show notes. This episode was produced with Maliha Syed and mixed and mastered by Sarah Bernard. Original theme music by Prom Queen. I created, host, and co-produce Your Last Meal. And The Leftovers, which is the episode you will hear next week with Pink Martini. The Leftovers is a bite-sized mini episode where you can hear some of the cuts that I didn't play in this episode, including a lightning round with China and Timothy. I'm Rachel Belle, and this is Your Last Meal.
My name is Anna Zeta.
I really like the rhythm of your name. I didn't know if it was Anna or Anna, but yeah, that's nice. Did your parents do that on purpose?
Thanks. I don't really think so, but I also like it. And I feel like my name gets very mispronounced all the time. But I feel like once people hear the rhythm, it's like, okay, Anna Zeta. So
yeah, it's lyrical.